Hello Alex, I'm well thank you. And how are things in Pушкино?
Things are great in Pушкино, but we usually have the temperature minus 20 degrees below zero, but nowadays we have zero all winter. It's anomaly or not anomaly, who knows? At least it's not a Russian winter as we know it.
Yes.
Okay, and it's is it South African summer? Because you have summer.
Yes, it is.
So yes, it is. How is
Yes.
it? What is it?
Well, today is not so great. We have a bit of overcast weather, some cloudy, but it's not cold. So the summer weather, when it's nice and hot, will get to the 35 Celsius. And in the evening, it drops down to about 15 degrees. But it's really not that cold. And most of the time, I'd say 80% of the time, there is sunshine and no clouds. Today is one of those days where there's a bit more cloud.
Beautiful.
But the weather's great.
Excellent. Okay, and so we will be talking about South African art and music, and thank you very much that you agreed to talk about it because
My pleasure.
thank you, because to me it's absolutely empty sport. I don't know anything about South African art or music, and it's interesting. And my first question is, okay, so what is, generally speaking, music or art personally for you? What does it mean for you?
For me, I try to listen and discover as much music as possible and art because it's constantly evolving. I listen also to sometimes what the youngsters are listening to these days, even though it might not be what I particularly like, but it's always very interesting to hear what is going on, in the fashionable times with young people as well. So I try to listen to as much different styles and of music and certainly also lots of art. Try and broaden my horizon, so to speak.
Great, a great expression, to broaden your horizon, to broaden your mind. Okay,
Exactly.
nice. And if we would talk about Russian art and Russian music, probably we would have a certain features, certain frame of this term, Russian. But what about South African? Does South African art and music have its own frame, different from any other parts of Africa?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty much a traditional way of things. We do have, of course, as you know, a lot of cultures, a lot of cultures that mix together, and we have different tribes, we have different indigenous art, we've got different types of music completely from the one spectrum to the other end. We've got pop, we've got tribal music, we've got traditional indigenous music as well, folk music almost in a way, and then we've got the same in the field of art. We've got political art, we've had, as you know, it's a young country in the general idea of as far as countries go. It's not as old as other bigger countries. So the history is also very much plays a part in that. And on the art side, it becomes more political. Not so much on the music side. The music side is a bit less political or trying to make a statement. So we did go through a stage in the apartheid years where there was a lot of what they call struggle art.
Oh, yes.
Very similar to, when other countries are going through a process of revolution, etc.
Oh, yeah.
And that was an interesting phase. Now we've got young artists
Yes.
who were born just before the 21st century, and they are now in their 20s, and they are now part of the new South Africa. They are part of the population who are more influential, they're more educated, and they have got much different ideas to say 30, 40 years ago when it was completely political. And that's a good thing, that everything is growing with the times, so to speak.
Okay, so talking about some kind of parallels, talking about Russia, we have a very distinctive period in the history of Russia, Russian Revolution, and years of socialism, and we have a distinctive features for each of these historical periods of life of our country. You had appetite, of course. Everybody knows it, and it's not a question. And probably first question: what did you listen when you were a child? Because you told me you went for a white school. What did you listen then? And what did your parents listen then? And probably everything changed after your country liberation. Did it change in music, in art? Are there any changes in music and art? What do you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. There is definitely. I know from where we were living a very much secluded lifestyle because of the regime and everything. We would actually be listening to a lot of pop music, especially from America, Europe. That was the kind of music we would listen to.
Okay.
And our parents obviously listened to the music of the 50s and the 60s. And then, of course, once democracy came and we had a new country, so to speak, the politics kind of, there were a lot of artists who were in exile. They actually weren't allowed to be in the country. And they would be arrested if they were caught because they were anti-government. So a lot of these artists actually made their name overseas while they were in exile. So they were actually more famous outside of the country because they weren't being banned. So we didn't know about these artists until after democracy. We didn't even know they existed. And once we came into a new democracy, we suddenly started seeing all this art and all this music from different cultures and things which we weren't allowed to be exposed to. And that was an amazing period of time as well.
Oh yes, what you said, we passed through that experience exactly as you described, absolutely the same way. We didn't know anything about nowadays very popular writers. We didn't even hear anything about them, but today they are quite popular. So, general question: which music and art is your personal interest? I mean, South African music and South African. Probably you could show something, a couple of pictures if it's possible.
Yes, I do, absolutely. And if you want to also hear a bit of sound, I don't know if you want to hear some of the sound, or will that interfere with your background sound?
That's fine. I will put my background sound down. Wonderful, wonderful. Good.
Not a problem.
Okay.
So here let's start with the artists. Here we have it's a much more classical style of art. This was a lady called Irma Stern. Now this is long before the apartheid years, so this would be about 100 years ago. So she made her name with a more classical style, as you can see, and she painted a lot of, every now and then you'll see a couple of paintings of other cultures, for example, as well. But a good example of more of a classical style than what we would later get used to as the struggle art and the political art, etc. And I'll show you the differences here. So here we have Gerard Sekoto, a black man from the townships. And here again, it's always about community. So it's always about people living together.
Okay.
Sometimes it becomes political, but you can see it's a different style entirely.
Okay.
It's almost like like an old communist era in a way, with the berets and everything. These are cadets that they would train in the army camps, etc., like that. So again, very interesting opposite art.
Okay.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, I thought I'd show you one black artist, one white artist as well.
Wonderful.
Of course, this man, William Kentridge, was one of the people who was detained and exiled. He could not come back to his country of birth until only after the 1990s. So he was very anti the government and had threatened people had threatened his life, etc. But one of my favorite artists, because he uses different platforms. He would draw black and white charcoal, charcoal pencil, on paper, on walls. You could see it, everything is different. You can see mostly black and white. So there's always a black and white theme to it. But you can see it's the charcoal on the surface, whether it's canvas or something like that. He's definitely one of my favorite artists of the modern time. Of course, there is quite some political stuff as well, as you can see here. But very interesting artist. Okay. Let us go then to some music. I will show you two opposite sides of the spectrum as well. Now, we actually heard some of this music when we were students, because it was okay for a white singer to play music with a black group as long as he was the leader, which was very strange, and it's very difficult to think.
Great.
But so this would be music that we could listen to. So I'll play some. This is a very famous song.
Nice.
It's been used in movies, etc. So you can see there it's a mix of cultures, which was very useful and helpful to build the nation again.
Very interesting.
To have very interesting.
Yes.
This kind of healed the country a little bit, because suddenly we were making music with other races, which was absolutely what the country needed to. And then just to show you on the opposite side, we have the Afrikaans pop group side. This is for the youngsters. This is mostly teenagers and students. It's very soft pop kind of music, nothing really rap or anything like that. So this would be a popular Afrikaans group in South Africa. You can hear there's a bit of a folk sound here as well. I think it's very similar to other countries where there's a bit of a pop feel to it. And that language they're singing is so that's really I thought would be a nice mix of what we basically have. And it's
great.
That's a good combination that taught you a little bit a bit more about our culture and music as we have it today. I hope that was a bit educational. Very interesting spectrum. What do you think?
Absolutely amazing. Especially, I have never heard it was Africano language, as the last guy said.
Yes.
But I feel some sounds from Holland. Exactly. Oh, describe the language. How was it born?
Right. Yes, of course. So, about 400 years ago, the Dutch were traveling around the Horn of Africa, and they were discovering and they were doing a spice route, so to speak. They were bartering the spices because Holland was big on spices in the 1600s or 1700s. And they found this little seaside place, and they dropped off their ship there, and they started building small camps there, etc., and met some of the locals. And over time, this is how we got our heritage from the Dutch.
Okay.
And you can hear that definitely. Well, that's very good. You've got a great ear. It's very similar to the Dutch. So it has origins of Dutch and German.
Oh yes, and German.
Flemish as well.
Okay.
So that's 400 years later. Our own language. We created our own language from that as a family of what the Dutch taught our ancestors many hundred years ago.
So for you, it is easy to speak that language and to understand it. Absolutely. Wow.
Ja, definitief. Ek kan nou sommer so vir jou praat op die oomblik en dit is wat ek nou vir jou kan sê.
Amazing. Amazing.
So you have the gift of bilingualism.
Wow. And your parents, they talk that language. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So and when you went to a white school, there were two languages, official languages.
Exactly. There was English and then this language Afrikaans.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Probably the last question. You know, some musicians said, "Don't believe." I don't believe to evening news. I don't believe to politicians, but I believe to music. What do you think?
Yes.
Does music always say the truth?
I think so. It joins hearts, it joins minds, it creates a sense of celebration, and it's a positive thing. It educates, it calms, it's always something that unites, and politics is just the opposite.
Okay.
And that's why I hope we have music for a much longer time than politics. Music is always there to heal as well, definitely.
Nice. Okay, and the last question. Do you think children should study music and art at school? And do you have such objects in your curriculum?
We
subjects?
do. It's a very good question.
Okay.
It's art, especially South African art and history of South African art, is a chosen subject by the pupils.
Okay.
And not by the schools, so they are allowed to take it as a special subject.
Oh.
But it is a very popular subject, but it still has a little bit of stigma attached to it. A kind of a nerdy thing, you know. If you study art, you're a bit of a nerd or a geek or something like that.
Oh.
But I believe that whether it's music or whether it's art or something like that is always very important for an education for a young person, because it teaches them history. It's got a combination of art, music. It actually is a very nice stepping stone, I think, to fulfilling a richer life when you become an adult and step into the big adult world.
Nice. Absolutely great conversation. And at the end of your class, I went to students and said that the only purpose we study English is to broaden your mind. And what do you know about South Africa? I asked that. We had a teacher from America, and I know a lot of things about America, and I know nothing about South Africa. That's why South Africa is more interesting to me than other parts of the world. And it's only the way you can expand your mind, and it is to go to classes with Godfri and ask them to draw something about South Africa, or to find any information, because we don't know anything. And I hope they will come to your class next week, and they will bring something, I
That would
don't
be
know
great.
what,
That would be
and
wonderful.
I will
Yes.
scan it and send it to you.
Okay.
Good. And
Wonderful. That would be a wonderful thing to see.
Good.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for that.
Appreciate your interview. Thank you very much. Have a good.
All the best.
Good.
You too. Thank you for the chat.
Good.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.